I'm Dwayne Brown. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, another powerful earthquake hits Nepal. The rescue missions halted and new details on the search for a Marine helicopter from Camp Pendleton.
It may be the key to helping California survive the drought. I'm Amita Sharma. We'll take a look at new rules for building and operating desalination plants and what it means for the new facility in Carlsbad. But first, following the money, the public weighs in on a proposed budget from San Diego Mayor Kevin Faulconer.
We want trash out of the waterways. We want to do everything we can to get trash out of the waterways.
San Diego Creek with a dirty reputation, the debate over new rules aimed at cleaning up waterways. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Hi, good evening. Thanks for joining us. A powerful earthquake shook eastern Nepal today, interrupting recovery efforts to a region still recovering from another devastating quake. Today's magnitude 7.3 tremor caused loose hillsides and cracked buildings to collapse. Military and medical response teams from California and around the world were on scene to help following another big quake less than 3 weeks ago. More than 8,000 people died. Authorities are searching for a Marine helicopter from Camp Pendleton that was delivering aid to earthquake victims there. U.S. defense officials say it's possible the chopper did not crash. There are reports an Indian helicopter may have heard chatter from a Marine aircraft about a possible fuel problem. 6 Marines and 2 Nepalese Army soldiers were on board that Huey. Military leaders say they lost contact with the chopper after it dropped off supplies today. The aircraft was part of a Marine light attack helicopter squadron. Scripps Health says their medical response team in Nepal has checked in and they're okay. The team has been working in the country for more than a week, treating hundreds of victims from last month's quake. Most of their time has been spent in remote mountain villages northwest of the capital of Kathmandu. Our coverage on the earthquake aftermath continues on air on KPBS Radio and online at kpbs.com. New developments tonight on the first Planned Parenthood clinic in the Imperial Valley we told you about last week. The fire chief there has signed off on the final clearance for the facility in El Centro. The move comes after weeks of delays and legal threats. Joining us from our North County Bureau is KPBS health reporter Kenny Goldberg. Kenny, give us some background. What's been going on between Planned Parenthood and the city of El Centro?
Well, Planned Parenthood has long tried to put a clinic in Imperial Valley. It has a very high teen pregnancy rate, and there's also a dearth of family planning services in the area. So they've been raising money, and earlier this year they started construction on a new clinic in El Centro. A few months ago, the fire chief came to give his final inspection, and at that time he said, hey, wait a minute. This clinic needs to be reclassified as an outpatient surgery center, and that classification would have required Planned Parenthood to make some extensive renovations, an expensive fire suppression system, and some other items. And while that dispute was going on, Planned Parenthood has been unable to operate on a full-time basis, and they haven't been allowed to perform abortions at the clinic.
In fact, Kenny, Planned Parenthood sued El Centro and the fire chief last week. Why did they take that action?
Well, they said the fire chief and the city of El Cajon were being discriminatory in not letting them function as a regular medical clinic. In fact, they said no other Planned Parenthood clinic in California is classified as an outpatient surgery center. So they sued to challenge the city and the fire chief.
And what role do you think Planned Parenthood opponents have played in this dispute?
Well, that's an interesting question because opponents have been very vocal. There have been a lot of Christian groups, well organized in Imperial County, that have been coming out against the clinic. And while lawmakers say they've been obeying the law, and the fire chief told me he's obeying the law, nonetheless, it's hard to believe that these residents, as well organized as they are and as vocal as they've been, haven't been able to influence lawmakers in some way.
Yeah, we see the facility there. What happens next, Kenny?
Well, because the fire chief signed off on the final fire safety approval, Planned Parenthood has dropped its lawsuit, And now the clinic just needs to wait to get its license from the California Department of Public Health, which should be in about 3 weeks. And at that point, they can operate full-time and offer first trimester abortions.
From our North County Bureau, KPBS health reporter Kenny Goldberg. A new report tonight finds San Diego rents rank among the highest in the nation. San Diego ranked 9th nationally on the latest apartmentslist.com survey, with an average rent of $1,800 for a 2-bedroom apartment. The survey found San Francisco was the most expensive rental market in the nation. Los Angeles and San Jose also made the top 10. Experts say high home prices are keeping rents up. San Diego's average rent is rising at 3.5% a year. That's a full percentage point higher than the national average. Paid to play at Qualcomm. We're learning more about how much the city of San Diego paid the Chargers for their home games. The team cashed in on rent credits and reimbursements, adding up to nearly $3 million over 8 years. Now, part of it is connected to a stadium complaint with the Americans with Disabilities Act. The Chargers are threatening to move to Los Angeles if they don't get a new stadium. A proposed $3 billion spending plan for the city of San Diego focuses on police and fire services, plus fixing crumbling streets and sidewalks. But some say it's not doing enough. Amita Sharma takes a closer look.
Hearings kicked off last night on San Diego Mayor Kevin Faulconer's proposed $3.2 billion budget. Residents asked that more money be devoted to parks and the arts. And some policy analysts say the spending plan contains a fairness deficit. Joining me are Taryn Mento, KPBS Metro reporter, and Kira Green, researcher and policy analyst with the Center on Policy Initiatives, a San Diego nonprofit policy development center. Taryn, let's start with you. You've covered this budget process extensively. What are some of the highlights of next year's proposed budget?
Well, what the mayor's really been focusing on in this budget is infrastructure and restoring city services. So this year he was proposing funding for hundreds of miles of paving of more streets, repairing some street lights, more park maintenance, playground equipment, but also restoring city services, meaning expanding recreation center hours and more resources toward the police and fire rescue departments.
Now, you also attended last night's budget hearing. What do San Diegans want to see get funded in the upcoming year?
Well, overall, it was really libraries and parks, individual ones, some libraries in San Isidro, and I believe even Ocean Beach was mentioned, and then also a lifeguard station in Ocean Beach. So it was very specifics related to those kinds of areas and individual communities.
Now, Kira, how do San Diego's poor neighborhoods fare in this budget?
So San Diego's poor neighborhoods will not get their needs met fully in this budget. And the reason for that is that in many places in the budget where there are decisions to be made about spending, the mayor's proposal is to spend sort of equally in all council districts. And the problem is that with the Community Budget Alliance, we look at the issue that underserved neighborhoods tend to be concentrated south of the 8, and they have infrastructure deficits. So they need more funding than other communities in order to bring those communities to an equal level.
Because for years, those areas have been ignored.
That's absolutely right.
So tell me specifically, what are some of the needs in the poor neighborhoods south of the 8?
Some of the most significant needs are around parks. There's a lack of public space for people, and these are health concerns. Kids need a place to exercise, family need a place to gather. There are also concerns around library space. Many people in poor neighborhoods rely on libraries for a place to go for cooling in the summertime or when it's hot. They also use it for books, their primary source of books, and internet access. And many of the libraries are too small and have inadequate hours. The same is true for rec centers, and streets are in very bad condition throughout these neighborhoods.
And how much do constituents in these areas participate in the process? For example, attending a budget hearing, a public hearing such as occurred last night?
Well, I think last night they came out in force and were really well represented. But I do want to highlight that it is very challenging for people in these neighborhoods. I mean, they're working a lot of hours to make ends meet, and budget hearings tend to take place during the day when people have to be at work. And so the evening hearing is an important opportunity, but it's still challenging. People still need childcare and transportation to make it to these meetings, and they have to get up early the next morning and go to work.
Now, are there parts of this budget that you like?
Absolutely. I think that not just myself, but the Community Budget Alliance as a whole, we're happy to see the mayor really making a commitment to neighborhood services, to vital infrastructure in these places. It's really about tweaking how we allocate things and coming up with a long-range plan for funding more of them, rather than a sort of wholesale disagreement with this budget.
Now, Taryn, in the past, Councilman David Alvarez has said that typically budgets ignore areas south of the 8. What does he think of this proposed budget?
Well, just before the meeting last night, actually, he had a news conference where he was trying to drum up, express more support for dedicating more funds toward things like libraries and parks and the arts and things that are specific in his community. But overall, he did say that he's very pleased with what the mayor, where the mayor has put some of the taxpayer money. But he would like to see, when the May revised budget comes out, we might see a little bit more money, and he would like to see those things dedicated to some of the libraries and parks and the arts that we spoke of before.
And what stage of the budget process are we in right now?
Well, coming up next, the mayor will come back later this month with his revised budget. The council will take some of the comments that were made at the budget hearing, and they will pass them along to the IBA. She'll gather them and put them into a format for the mayor's consideration. Until then, people can call up their council member and tweet them or Facebook them with any of their concerns, but they will get a chance to, again, speak their mind when the council takes it up. I believe on May 21st, the council will take up the revised budget.
Taryn Mento, Kira Green, thanks so much for coming on the program.
Thank you.
San Diego veterans and first responders helped raise the 9/11 flag this morning outside City Hall. The 22-foot flag arrived last week for its last stop on a worldwide tour. It was sewn together from miniature American flags representing each victim in the September 11th terror attacks almost 14 years ago. It also contains flags from nations that lost citizens on 9/11. Assistant Fire Chief Brian Finnessy says public safety has certainly improved since then.
We're far better prepared now. We have much better equipment, much better training, and our firefighters are far better prepared than they were prior to 9/11. So, well, clearly tragic. I believe, speaking for the city of San Diego, we are very well prepared in the event of an attack here close to home.
It is our duty to remember we are their legacy, and we will stand tall through the work we do every single day to protect the citizens of our great city and our wonderful country.
The police chief, mayor, and some veterans got a chance to sign the memorial flag. It now heads back to New York City, where it will be permanently displayed in the 9/11 memorial site. A developer who wants to build a new open-air mall on the edge of a lagoon in Carlsbad presented his plans today. The plan will keep 85% of the land as open space. The site is next to Cannon Road in Carlsbad, where drivers see strawberry fields east of the freeway. The developer says walking trails and viewpoints will be finished before the commercial shopping and dining areas open for business. The developer wants to present a plan to the Carlsbad City Council this August. He hopes for a vote on the development project in September. California is implementing tough new regulations designed to get trash out of the state's waterways. Garbage litters many San Diego creeks and rivers, but the push for new strategies has some city officials concerned. KPBS reporter Eric Anderson has the story.
You got a fairly weak constructed rug, but the wool is pretty good.
Leonard Smith has been cleaning carpets in this Logan Heights neighborhood for 65 years. On a recent morning, he helped a customer carry an area rug to his National Avenue shop.
We've been down here when there was nothing here except for one other building, and now you can look around and see what there is here.
Choice Creek runs right beside the store. It slips between the working-class neighborhoods of Logan Heights and Shelltown, and it flows under Interstates 5 and 15. Like the surrounding neighborhoods, the creek has a bit of a reputation. Coastkeeper's Travis Pritchard points to a discarded ball.
Just to find trash, all you gotta do is look, and you see just how ubiquitous it is here in this stream. Because this stream is a trapezoidal, non-vegetated channel, it really gives us an opportunity to see the trash.
The creek bed runs from the East County through central San Diego, and it finds San Diego Bay near the 32nd Street Naval Station. The trash seems to collect here near the mouth of the creek. Water actually flows upstream every time the tide comes in. Pritchard says the trash spoils more than just the creek bed here.
About 80% of the marine debris that we find out in the ocean actually comes from inland sources, and this is where those inland sources are. It gets washed down from our watersheds into the river, where it then flows out to the ocean or the bay.
That's why clean water advocates are encouraged by new California rules approved in April. State water regulators passed a plan that requires all municipalities to capture or divert trash in waterways. Each city gets a chance to tailor a plan that controls trash coming from commercial or residential areas. But city spokesman Bill Harris worries the new rules are an expensive distraction. He doesn't want to divert attention from ongoing efforts to reduce bacteria or heavy metal pollution.
We see that if we have to go after trash early, meaning before the deadlines for the other regulations that we've got, we're going to be building structures. We're going to be building fences, inserts to our drains that work marginally at best according to our research, but then are going to get superseded by different treatment methods that are going to be more holistic.
Harris says the city will have to install traps that filter stormwater and keep trash out of gutters. Nets might be needed to snag trash floating down streams.
We want trash out of the waterways. We want to do everything we can to get trash out of the waterways, but we also need to make sure that all of our regulations align so we're acting efficiently, spending taxpayer money wisely, and getting the biggest bang for the buck.
The local rules are still being developed, but Harris worries the city will end up spending money on temporary fixes. But Beto Vasquez sees it differently. He's lived near Chollas Creek his whole life. Vasquez knows the waterway isn't what it could be, but he also sees the potential.
I know a little bit more upstream from here at the Market Creek Plaza, they've kind of already tapped into that a little bit and tried to incorporate that part of the wildlife for people's enjoyment.
A multi-million-dollar restoration effort near the Jacobs Center in Encanto created a more natural park-like environment there. Plants hide the trash that's so visible just a few miles downstream. But even that trash would be gone if the new rules work. Vasquez says it's all about the follow-through.
It really does. It needs some teeth into it, and just policy on its own or ordinances or laws aren't just going to work if they're not being enforced, if they're not coupled with action, if the community itself does not buy into the idea. It's going to be short-lived.
Vasquez says years of good intentions have fallen short when it comes to restoring the creek. However, he thinks taking trash out of the equation may be enough to get residents to see the possibilities. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
Our video journalist Nick McVicker helped produce that story. A growing trend in the face of California's drought, the state may have more than a dozen desalination plants up and running in the next few years, including one in Carlsbad. Amitha Sharma is looking at new rules that may change the game for desal plants.
Even though the largest desalination plant in North America will open this fall in Carlsbad, California is only now coming up with rules for building and running desal facilities. Joining me to talk about the new standards and their effectiveness are Bob Yamada, the Water Resources Manager for the San Diego County Water Authority, and Matt O'Malley of San Diego Coastkeeper. Bob, let's start with you. What specifically do the new guidelines address?
Well, the new guidelines bring statewide consistency to what has been a permitting process that has been conducted on an individual plant-by-plant basis across the state. And, the permitting process that was utilized for Carlsbad worked fine, but now these new regulations raise the bar even higher and really put in place the most protective regulations in the world for desalination facilities.
So we're talking about how the water gets into the plant and how the salt gets back into the ocean, correct?
That's right. It covers the intake of water into the desalination plant and then the discharge of the salty water that's left over, the brine, if you will, back to the ocean.
Now tell me about subsurface intake versus open ocean intake.
The new regulations really lay out a requirement for subsurface intakes unless they're not feasible. And for example, in the case of Carlsbad, when that project went through its permitting process a few years ago, those subsurface intakes were found to be infeasible. And so the new regulations really set in motion a process to determine first whether or not subsurface intakes are feasible, and then if they're not, then to move on to, say, an open ocean intake or an intake that's above the seabed, where you would screen for keeping out those microorganisms, fish larvae and fish eggs, for example, from coming into the facility.
Okay, and very quickly, what determines subsurface intake versus open ocean intake?
Well, as part of these new regulations, there will be what's called a determination, a feasibility determination. So you'll need to go through a study and look at all the various aspects of a particular site and whether or not it makes sense to do a subsurface intake or not.
Matt, how do you view these new desal standards?
Well, we're glad they exist. I mean, we needed something on a statewide basis. I think there's some good and some bad. From our perspective, we're glad that there is a preference for subsurface because that is the more environmentally benign technology. However, when it comes to the feasibility determination, we were hoping that the regulations will more mimic sort of federal or other state guidelines that really don't consider cost because it is a more expensive technology. I also see certain things like after the fact mitigation that it still allows. So basically any kind of environmental impacts that occur may be taken care of after the fact. And it's really hard to measure one with one as far as wetlands restoration or things like that. And then even some of the screen intakes that it might be allowed if subsurface are shown to be infeasible, really it's something that are problematic. The State Water Board's own reports show that they might be between 0 and 1% effective. So our concerns primarily lie in the environment. And we think that if not a mandate, then at least a rebuttable presumption should have existed for subsurface intakes.
Now, you oppose desalination. Why?
We don't, actually. We don't totally oppose desal. I think there is a time and place for it, and I think when it's done, we'd like to see it done appropriately, and that's environmentally and economically appropriately. And so I think there are circumstances where once we've exhausted conservation and once we've exhausted recycling technologies, it will play a part. It's just when it does that, we want to make sure it's the right environmental and economic decision.
Now, do you worry that because we're experiencing a drought, that this might drive more desalination projects without thorough consideration?
I do. I think the statewide regs will help. I think, though, even though they're designed to create consistency, because it leaves a lot of discretion in the regional water boards, and there are many of those throughout the state, I think you may see some inconsistency statewide. And so that's kind of why we wanted them shored up. Again, there is some good in there, but I still think it will be problematic moving forward. And a lot of people are calling for more desal, without maybe understanding the full economic and environmental impacts of it.
Bob, now you're assigned to work on the Carlsbad desal project.
Right.
How closely does that project conform to these new rules?
Well, first of all, the Carlsbad project already has gone through a permitting process, and that led to its construction, which now stands at about 90% complete and will be online in the fall, providing us a new water supply. In the future, the Carlsbad project will need to conform to these new regulations. So we'll need to, as the permits are renewed for the Carlsbad project, and ultimately the power plant adjacent to the Carlsbad project will cease operations. And when that happens, the project will need to come into compliance with these new regulations. So we're anticipating that will be one of the first projects to utilize the new regulations that the state has just put into motion.
And that Carlsbad power plant goes offline in 2017?
Should be by the end of 2017, although that schedule may shift a little bit. But when that happens, that will really set in motion the permit renewal process that will, and we will fully comply with these regulations, which are, in our belief, and I think the state's belief, fully protective of the marine environment.
We've got to wrap it there. Bob, Matt, thanks so much for coming on the program.
Thank you.
I'm Gwen Eiffel. On the next News Hour, our series on artificial intelligence continues. How supercomputers are being trained to diagnose cancer. That's Tuesday on the PBS News Hour.
Mirror, mirror on the wall, imagine a dressing room mirror giving you fashion advice. These high-tech fitting rooms are competing with online shopping. Associated Press reporter Luke Sheridan explains why some privacy advocates are concerned.
Video screens in lieu of mirrors, giant touch screens and text messages to keep you engaged. The fitting room is going digital.
I think what we're watching here is some fundamental changes in the broader world of retail.
Retailers say providing one-on-one attention and maximizing the technology can create a unique in-store experience.
The customer can select a specific size and color, and the data is connected to our item availability system. So the associate will know that the item is available in the store and then knows to look for it and bring it back to the room.
Neiman Marcus is hoping to engage shoppers by making comparisons easier. The memory mirror displays side-by-side outfits and 360 views to help visualize different options. Rebecca Minkoff uses touchscreen mirrors and text messages in its stores.
It could be these earrings, these boots, this jacket.
CEO Yuri Minkoff says technology has become an important tool to help them move their high-end offerings.
And what we're finding is that 75% of the people that are using the fitting rooms want to see the designer, Rebecca's, her styles, her looks that she's put together, as well as her recommendations.
As with most technology these days, data plays a big role. Stores hope to track fashion trends and habits, the likes and the dislikes. That has privacy advocates concerned.
So as long as the customers know and are given a right to choose what's collected or what their interactive experience is, that probably makes sense to most people. But our concern is clandestine or surreptitious collection of data.
Even these new fitting rooms can soon look outdated. Displays are now being tested that will allow you to view outfits in different colors without the need to even try them on. Luke Sheridan, The Associated Press.
We're looking at a cooling trend in San Diego. Clouds move in along the coast, temperatures mostly in the 60s. There is a chance of rain on Thursday. 60s as well in the inland valleys. Cooler, though, in the mountains. Temperatures there in the 50s and 60s. 80s and 70s expected in the desert. Here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. On Midday Edition, 1 year ago, 14 separate fires scorched 26,000 acres and destroyed 46 homes. We take an in-depth look at the causes and conditions. That's tomorrow at noon on KPBS Radio. Of course, you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.